think that's the way with all significant decisions. And there's plenty of data to substantiate this. There's plenty of information out there that'll tell you that people that are going to make a purchase, from the moment that they indicate an interest in that, the average time between that and the actual purchase for like 80% of them is over like 90 days. Yet we're trying to get everybody to decide like 90 seconds.
What's up, fitness friends? Welcome back to the Future of Fitness podcast and interview series. This is your host, Eric Malzone, and we're on episode number 145. Pat Rigsby is back. I love talking to Pat. Great guy, huge insights, very well experienced, and we got into a really interesting topic. How to find a coach, how to find a business coach. I've always had a mentor, at least for the last 15 years of my life. I've always had a business coach, always had a mentor. I'm always looking for people who I believe can get me to the next level in the direction I want to go. And, within the fitness industry, Pat got in early as far as a business coach within the fitness and health industry. He's obviously built a great name for himself. If you haven't yet, go to his website at patrigsby.com and sign up for his email newsletter because it's amazing. It's really good. But nowadays, there's a lot of business coaches out there, right? There's a lot of noise in the market. There's a lot of people who are preying on people's struggles within the fitness industry, and we dive into that and hit it head on. What are these people doing? Why are they doing it? And I think we named some names possibly as well. So we're not scared to do that. But how do you choose a business coach, right? Do you have to be a great athlete to be a great coach? Do you have to be a great business person to be a great coach? That's a great conversation. How do you choose one? How do you sort through the BS? And what does it all mean? And how can you find people to help you get to the next level? And we talk about all that. And it's super important, especially if you put as high value on mentorship as I do. So really enjoy the episode. Before we do that, I want to thank Edgest. I just noticed I was going through some stuff that whoever this person is left a really nice review on Stitcher. And I want to say thank you by reading it. It says, essential listening for fit pros. I absolutely love this show. Eric is extremely likable and the guests, thank you. And the guests are always full of incredibly valuable information like Pat. Topics are wide ranging, so it's not always your typical fitness content. It will open your mind to much greater possibilities. Thank you so much for going and leaving that review. If you haven't yet, please go to whatever you listen to these podcasts, right? iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify. I use Castbox, and leave a nice review. Subscribe to the channel. Go to YouTube as well. Subscribe there. We really appreciate it. It goes a long way, and we are slowly yet steadily building our audience here, and it's awesome. And I love hearing from everybody as well. So feel free to reach out to me. Today's podcast is brought to you by EliteGymInsiders.com. If you are within the fitness industry, if you are a gym owner, or if you're looking to just get connected with people, go to EliteGymInsiders.com. Fill out the application. I will personally look over the applications and let you into the group. We have about 400 fitness professionals in the Slack community. It's Slack. You have to get used to that if you're not used to it, but it's well worth your time. We're about to roll out our August partner. And I'll give you a hint. It's a digital marketing agency who is extremely good. And we're going to have a special offer for people, the first 10 people to take us up. And all you have to do is go and join the free community, and you'll start getting deals like that. We're going to roll out one every month, and it's going to be awesome stuff you really need, like business coaching, right? Nonprofit organizations, educational products, anything that is relevant to the fitness industry that you'll benefit from that we've already vetted. So great insights. Go to EliteGymInsiders.com, get connected with other people, ask questions, get discounts. It's just a no-brainer, right? So go, once again, EliteGymInsiders.com. Without further ado, let's get on to a great episode with Pat Rigsby, episode number 145. Enjoy the show. Thanks for tuning in. And we're live. The man, Pat Rigsby, is back. Welcome, Pat.
Hey, I'm excited to be here, man. Yes, nice that we get to get back together after the other podcast episode going to vintage status, I guess.
Yeah. I was just, so for listeners, I was just researching it. Like, what was the episode number that I did with Pat? And I looked back and it didn't have an episode number. So it was before I started numbering my episodes, which was probably when I was in the mindset of like, I don't know how long I'm going to do this, but 145 episodes later, here we are with Pat again. So you can check it out. I think it's called, the episode name was Coach, Sell, Create.
Okay.
And it was great. But a lot of water under the bridge since then, man. What are you up to nowadays?
It's summer around here, so it's that wonderful blend of hanging out with the family and some and some fun stuff going on professionally. But it's I think it's a great little window of time where I get to feel very, very pleased with kind of shackle me to it every hour of the day.
Yeah. What does your average day look like?
Oh gosh. An average
such
day,
a thing.
There's probably 3 days a week. It probably looks like, get up somewhere probably around 6, maybe slightly before 6, just kind of organically. I will get up and kind of do a little bit of writing stuff, do a quick workout. And then usually like during the school year, it'll be time to help some people get things moving for school. During the summer, I will shift into answering emails and responding to some stuff. I'm not one of those folks that says, hey, I'm only going to check email for this period of time, or I would never check it in the morning. I'm pretty good about not just reacting to things. I can take a glance at email and just kind of be aware of what I have in front of me rather than feeling like I have to play hot potato with it and respond. So, I do most of my strategic type of work on the business type stuff before 11. And then from about 11 till 3, it's usually the interactive stuff. So coaching calls, talking to prospective clients, doing interviews. And then somewhere between 3 and 4, I kind of shift out of work mode, take an intermission for a few hours, and then maybe somewhere later in the evening, if everybody's into a movie or something else and it's not particularly engaging to me, I may come back on for a little bit. But no matter what, at the end of the day, I'll plan the next day. I'll take 3 minutes of inventory of today and plan tomorrow. That's probably 3 days a week, the days that maybe there are no clients in town, no mastermind meetings, no travel, anything. So that's probably the norm. And it's a nice rhythm for me, because about the time that I may be losing a little bit of steam in the middle of the day, I start to do the interactive stuff, and that energizes me. And I get a lot of enjoyment out of spending some time with other people. I'm definitely not an internet marketer that is averse to interaction.
Yeah, no, definitely not. I mean, you're out there. You're always putting stuff out. Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's commonalities between people who are successful within the entrepreneurial space. There's always a morning routine, right? The heavy thought-laden work tends to start in the morning, right? And then everything, as it gets more and more tactical, it tends to move later in the day. I tend to find that sometimes on days that I have a hard stop, like let's say I got to be out of here, ready to go by 1 a.m. or 1 p.m., right? Something like that. The amount of work I can get done in a 4 to 5 hour window is incredible. I wonder, well, why don't I just structure all my days like this? Why don't I just give myself a hard stop? one, and then I got to get all this stuff done. And then the interesting thing too from that is that I found a great value as well as the just taking a few minutes to plan the next day the night before.
Yeah. I lucked out with that. I was exposed to that very early in my adult life. I went to a Franklin Quest seminar before it was even Franklin Covey, and kind of learned that habit in 1994. And it's been really part of my life ever since. And man, every once in a while, I've found myself drifting a little bit. And it's always been because I was not being diligent with the planning stuff, because it's the difference between you proactively deciding how you're going to use your time and your resources, or you kind of just reacting to what comes your way. And that one little 5-minute kind of session, man, it probably adds 50% value to my upcoming day.
Yeah. That's crazy, right? It's the return on investment is huge. I mean, last night because when you're maybe towards the end of the day, your head's spinning, you got a lot of things in your mind, but you're just mentally fatigued, right? So if you just write down the things that you didn't get done, or maybe you want to get to the next day, next morning you just have so much clarity and you're able to get right to it. When people ask you what you do, and here's why I'm going to ask this question, give you some context, is I travel up to Canada quite often, right? And when you go across the border, they ask you your passport and they ask you, what are you doing here and all that good stuff, right? Always makes me nervous. I'm never doing anything wrong, but I always get nervous, right? They always make me feel like I'm doing something. But anyway, so they ask, what do you do? I'm like, well, I podcast host, a consultant, a marketer. And the more you stumble, the more they're like, all right, we got more questions for you, guy. Right. So now I consultant. I'm a consultant. Right. Yeah. And then it's clear when people ask you what you do, what do you say?
I tell them consultant.
Okay.
Because that's something they may not even know what a consultant does, but they've at least heard that before.
Yeah.
So it's something they can kind of wrap their head around. Whereas if I were to say, like, what I do, I feel like is more coaching than consulting.
Mm-hmm.
I think if I say business coach, that's not something that they've heard as often. So they don't, they may try to dig a little bit deeper with that. I mean, for years, I couldn't even explain to my parents what I do. Right. When I founded a franchise, that was something they could at least wrap their head around, because they knew what franchises were. And then I screwed that up and sold all that. Right. So, hey, the one thing you guys get that I do, I'm done with.
I'm not doing it anymore.
Yeah. So, consultant would be what I would tell somebody who I didn't really want to dive deep into the conversation.
Yeah.
And then for somebody that I'm happy to get some depth in the conversation, I'd probably tell them coach.
Yeah. And what is so let's go into that, man. And when did you start business coaching? How long ago do you think that was?
It was the end of 2005, beginning of 2006.
Okay. So 13, 14 years, right? And yeah. And was it specific to the fitness industry?
It was. I had 2 fitness facilities at that point, and they had both done pretty well in markets that probably wouldn't traditionally be fitness hotbeds. Small towns. One was a town of 23,000. The other one was a town of about 50,000. And both of them did really, really well. And so I had a few people regionally ask, well, what are you doing? Can you teach me to do that? And so did a little bit of that stuff, but it was almost running exactly parallel. I had been exposed to some of the online or internet marketing type of stuff like Ryan Lee was doing, Eric Ruth was doing within the industry. So I collaborated with Eric Ruth, and basically Eric served as like the publisher, and we used my intellectual property, and I launched my first course called the Personal Training Money Machine. We created it in 2005. We didn't launch it till 2006. So that launch gave me a little bit more of a platform to take on a few more clients. And then throughout 2006, there were, another product, and then my first kind of membership program.
Awesome. And we talked about recording. When I first started in the fitness industry 10, 11 years ago, it was hard to find a business coach, one specific to the industry. You can find a business coach for a lot of different industries. It's changed, right? There's a lot. There's a lot of high-end coaching. There's a lot of mastermind groups. There's a lot of, digital marketing groups. You name it. There's a lot of people who I know who are only a couple of years into the industry, but they're running a group, right?
So,
go for it.
It's been a lot like the industry itself, right? The fitness industry, when I was just getting into it, a personal trainer was far less common, especially outside of really affluent markets, because almost everything was one-on-one. Mm-hmm. And if you go back just a little bit before that, they were really not common at all. So, once fitness fitness coaching, personal training became a little bit more mainstream. So about the time group training, boot camps, all that stuff started to really hit the scene with a lot of popularity, the number of business owners dramatically increased. And, so there was that explosion. And then, so I think once Facebook advertising became a real thing, like it became a primary driver of a business, business coaches kind of followed suit with almost that same exact kind of explosion. It was like, hey, there's just a few. And then next thing you know, there are, it seemed like there are as many coaches as there are business owners. And it's a lot like the personal training industry in that there are some really good ones, and there are not so, some that are not so good. There are some that have really done their homework and have a lot of personal experience, and then some that figured out how to run a Facebook ad and do a sales call, and they call that coaching. So, I think that probably would be the case with any industry or profession that isn't regulated in any really specific way. There are lots of pros to it. I'll be the first to admit I was a beneficiary of the fact that you can kind of jump up the ladder pretty quickly in the industry. I was writing in the industry trade publications and speaking at the industry events, and just a couple of years after starting a business, whereas if I would have gone into a more established profession, it might have taken me decades.
Yeah.
So, there's some pluses with that, but then there's also not a real traditional career path or a real traditional way to vet quality between people. So you're kind of on your own to choose a trainer, and on your own to choose a business coach.
Yeah. Do you use a sports analogy? Because I know you love sports. Do you think you have to be a great athlete to be a great coach when it comes to business coaching? Do you have to have run a great business?
Well, I would hope not, because I was a pretty successful college baseball coach. I was a pretty mediocre player. But, I think that you probably have to have some track record of success. You don't have to have like this unbelievable track record of success. I mean, I've consulted with 9-figure companies, and I've never run a 9-figure company. But I think you have to have a way to have aggregated a lot of knowledge and information. So can you help a business without having run a business of that magnitude? Sure. Can you do it without having a solid amount of practical experience and exposure to knowledge and education and varied situations? Probably not.
Yeah. Yeah. It's someone asked me that recently. It was somebody who works at one of the largest franchises out there. And it made me think too. I mean, the coach, one of my best coaches in sports was mediocre at best at water polo, right? But he was one of the best coaches in the country. And he always mentioned that too. And how would you, if you're a fitness professional and you're looking for a business coach? Because I mean, I've always
something before you jump ahead on, like, but how many years, whether or not he was a great player, how many years did he play?
I think he played through college. So he probably played at least 8 years, 7 years. Right. Yeah.
So plenty of experience.
Yes.
And in many cases, because he didn't necessarily have, an unbelievable level of talent, he may have had to deal with a lot of situations that somebody who was more talented at those younger levels didn't. So I was a college baseball coach. The first coach in that program was a borderline Major League Baseball Hall of Fame candidate. Like, there are plenty of people still to this day arguing that he should be in the Hall of Fame. And he was a multiple-time All-Star, you name it. My winning percentage was way higher than his. I mean, significantly. And I wasn't 1/100th of the player he was. But, I still think you have to have some experience, because it's hard to have empathy and really be able to relate to people and serve them well if you haven't had experience. So that's maybe the difference, right? Like, does somebody have to have run a $10 million a year company to help a $10 million a year company? Maybe not, but they probably can't have had like 6 months of business experience and be a lot of help to that company.
Yeah. I think there's so many things why you go to a business coach, right? I mean, you go for experience, you go for a network, you go for, maybe a specific knowledge set that person has. I mean, I look back, using the coaching analogy again, is I had great coaches at my gym. And there was ones that were great athletes that I just assumed, well, I'll make them a coach because they're great athletes, right? As a CrossFitter. And, you'd see them get up in front of, class and say, okay, today we're going to work on muscle ups. And they just go and they grab the rings and they just, well, you kind of do like this, right? And next thing you know, they're up on top of the rings and people are shaking their heads like, what? But someone who had struggled, right? Had done all the little work on the progressions, degressions, things like that to get to that point and finally get their muscle up after like 2 years, they can coach it spot on. And they can tell that story of like, listen, I remember when I was at your state. I remember that was a struggle. It was hard, right? But if you keep at it and you keep doing these things that I'm telling you to do, you'll see success. And I think that's, a huge part of it too, is, not only the experience, but I think a great coach has to have struggled at some point. Right?
Yeah, I think the people that something came to very easily don't have a lot of patience or understanding of what the average person deals with. And, in the coaching world, we're typically dealing with somebody that may have an average level of performance, and that's why they're coming to get help.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for meeting somebody where they are instead of expecting them to make this kind of quantum leap to where the extremely talented person is.
Yeah. And perspective too. I think, one of the biggest things that you see is for entrepreneurs is you get so stuck in the weeds. You don't see the behaviors that are keeping you stuck, and you just need someone to take it from a different point of view, to recognize those things. Because I do it all the time. I'm like, oh, why am I stuck in this specific area? Because I'm doing the same thing over and over and over again, but I just don't see it. And that's, I think that's a high value thing, is how ultimately what I've seen with all the great coaches I've had, they have empathy, right? They have some sort of empathy in varying forms. My high school coach, he's a real jerk at times. Sorry, Larry, I love you, man. But the other thing is they ask great questions. And that's really key too. If you're a fitness professional, maybe let's set you back 10, 15 years. How would you qualify a business coach? If you're going to get on a call, what type of questions would you ask somebody?
I would probably ask more about, I would ask them questions that would be a little bit off the beaten path resume wise. Like, hey, how did you get to where you are? A very open-ended question rather than, well, what qualifies you for this? And give me three testimonials or case studies I can go ask. I'm like, well, am I really going to give you bad ones?
Right.
I mean, heck, there are even people in our industry now that have like non-disparagement clauses in their contracts when they sign, like business coaches. So nobody can go say anything other than glowing stuff about them.
No.
So
people, you can do that?
I mean,
I guess.
I don't know how enforceable it is, but
right.
They probably have deep enough pockets to scare the clients, right? But I'd ask, okay, how did you get to where you were? What kind of things do you think you learned along the way? I mean, I would want to know kind of what their journey has been like to know if they have the perspective that I'm going to be able to connect with. Because one of the things that I've found as a consumer of coaching is, there are plenty of people that have knowledge that would be of use to me that they currently possess. But, how do they communicate? How can you connect with them? And so I would just probably spend a lot of time asking open-ended stuff to just get a feel for whether or not I was going to enjoy working with somebody. Because there are plenty of people that I've met in person that I've enjoyed learning from them through a book more than I've enjoyed personal interaction.
Yeah. Yeah. I can think of a few of those as well. Do you have a coach? Do you have a mentor? Are you working with anybody?
Man, right now I'm doing some stuff in a coaching group with Michael Hyatt. I've done some more recent masterminding with Dean Jackson, and then I'm in a group currently, a small group with Kevin Nation. So there are three that I'm probably a little more focused on right now. I'm always trying to do something. I haven't done any big live events as of late. I tend to do better in, like, as a consumer in one-on-one or small kind of workshop settings than I do going to, the traffic and conversion type events or something.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a big thing too. When I look for, mentors along the way, I'm always interested to see who mentored them and who they work with as well. And I think a big question to ask a lot of business coaches or whoever you choose to work with is what is that person's definition of success? Because you can ask, I've never run a 9-figure business, right? But I don't think that's success to me. If anyways, I feel successful because I'm living a lifestyle that I want to live. And, I know that's a big part of your messaging too, is, build the business that serves your lifestyle, right? Because that's ultimately that, I find that if that's my value system, if I ask a business coach, be like, well, what's your measure of success? $10 million. I'd be like, well, that'd be great. I'm sure it would give me a certain level of freedom, or it may not. It may completely ruin my life, my relationships, right? It's very possible, if not probable, that would happen. And I think that's a big point of it too, is does a coach or a mentor share a value system with you?
Yeah. So some of this too, like when you think about where a coach connects with their prospective client and how that journey goes, some of those questions are already answered, but some of them, like, so what I see a lot of with people doing on Facebook, whether it's a fitness coach connecting with a prospective client or a business coach connecting with a prospective client, so many of the ads are just geared towards, okay, are you desperate right now? If so, let's move forward. And there's not really any vetting process. It's just kind of almost late night infomercial, kind of preying on desperation. Whereas I think that the better fit usually comes from a little bit more of a lengthy courtship, if you will, right? I mean, for me, I don't really want to run ads directly to try to get a client to cold traffic, because I'd rather them get on my newsletter list. And so by the time we get on a conversation, like on a phone conversation, they feel like they have a pretty good feel for who I am, what I do, what I'm about. And if they're completely unfamiliar with any of that, then I've probably failed in the lead up. So, I think fitness businesses would be a little bit better served to take that route too, instead of just trying to catch this person at this moment of desperation and perfect timing. Hey, we're starting this challenge on Monday. Are you in or are you out? And, just following up with them so they can see how your community is a little bit different. They can see the way that you're maybe more attentive to clients than the gyms down the street. And I think that a lot of people see that kind of follow up with a prospect as, hey, we're going to chase them down until they buy, rather than, no, we're going to position ourselves so that by the time we actually speak, they're pre-sold.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of similarities. I think there's a ton between, being a fitness professional and being a business coach. You could probably name 10 in the next 30 seconds if we wanted to. But, one thing I think in the part of the journey of the fitness professional too, is at first they take any client, right? Any client, right? Doesn't matter. You're within a 10-mile radius. I'll take you. Let's start now. Here's how I work. Eventually you start to learn that your business thrives when you're taking in the right clients in many forms, like if it's a free call or, a free introduction session as a, whether you're a coach or a fitness professional, over time, you start to realize like, I'm actually qualifying this person to be a client.
Yeah.
Who I'd want to work with. And can I help them? That's the other thing, is more people are thinking, can I truly help this person? Do I understand their problems? And then you can move from there.
I mean, coming to this industry from being a college baseball coach was arguably like the best blessing I could have had professionally, because it would have never dawned on me as a college baseball coach to try to get, somebody to sign a scholarship like within the first 30 seconds I met them, right? It was, okay, we're going to get this pool of people identified as qualified prospects, people that might be able to be a part of our program. We're going to send them something to get them to kind of raise their hand and say, hey, I'm reciprocating this interest. We're going to follow up and talk, send them direct mail pieces, email, whatever, and try to get them to campus. And then at campus, like once they're at campus, it's kind of like that consultation or free session or whatever else. And at that point, you get to decide, well, hey, do we want to make an offer to this person? And is this a fit? And so there was that kind of process that you just didn't really think about circumventing. And so I just I guess intuitively just adopted the same process when I came to the fitness industry. And, you know, I think a lot of people in the fitness industry tend to want buyers to buy on their timeline. And sometimes it's just because they need money, right? So they need people to act now.
Sure.
And they try to ask somebody to marry them before they've gone on a first date almost. And so, I feel pretty fortunate that just never really dawned on me as an option because of what I'd been exposed to previously.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such and the dating marriage analogy is the best. You want to run us through that one? Why is it's a good one. I love it.
So when we think about the way that relationships work, business relationships should probably work just like any other relationship. And so when I'm trying to think about like what I want to do professionally, what do I want to do online, I start with like, how would this go if I'm just building a relationship offline? And so if you were going to, let's say you were seeking a significant other, that was an ultimate goal. We wanted that. Well, there's kind of a process, right? Like you're going to meet somebody somewhere. You're going to probably need to be in an environment where those types of people are, whether we're talking about, hey, I want to meet somebody at the gym, or I want somebody with common interests, whatever else. I'm going to put myself in this spot where there are people. Well, I mean, that's kind of marketing 101, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to start a conversation, and it's all going to be really probably small talk in the beginning. It's going to be really, really awkward if you try to jump ahead. And before you ask somebody what their name or phone number is, like you're asking them, about, hey, tell me about your family history, because I want to make sure that we're going to be able to have kids, and are your parents divorced? And
yeah, do you have genetic issues? Like,
yeah, we don't jump into that up front, but then there's this, okay, I'm going to connect with you and I'm going to ask permission to continue the conversation.
Yeah.
I.e., hey, can I have your phone number? Hey, would you like to get coffee sometime? Whatever. And we're going to get permission to take that next step. And it's a logical step that we've been conditioned to kind of accept throughout the year. So if you met somebody and 3 minutes in the conversation, you said, hey, you know what? Would you like to go to on vacation for a couple of weeks in California? We're leaving tomorrow. I mean, that's probably jumping the gun. And most people would say you're a little creepy, right? So we follow this process. And then through every successive date, there's more of an understanding whether or not, hey, is this person a fit for me? Am I a fit for this person? Do we share values? Do we share interests? And ultimately, you get to decide, hey, do we want to make this relationship a more significant, more committed one for the long term? Well, that's the way that marketing probably should work. That's the way people are conditioned to make significant decisions. But we basically want to ask people up front, like, you know what? Hey, we're going to have a wedding on Monday. Would you like to be a participant? Maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's the way with all significant decisions. And there's plenty of data to substantiate this. There's plenty of information out there that'll tell you that people that are going to make a purchase, from the moment that they indicate an interest in that, the average time between that and the actual purchase for like 80% of them is over like 90 days. Yet we're trying to get everybody to decide like 90 seconds. And that's not, frankly, as a seller of services, I probably don't want the person who's deciding in 90 seconds, because it's probably a desperation kind of impulse thing that they're more likely to have buyer's remorse about.
Yeah. I
want the person who's made a really informed decision and said, look, of all the options available, that's the one for me. I want to be that guy.
Yeah. Yeah. And also oftentimes with that point of desperation comes unmanageable expectations, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, I need to turn this around in 30 days. Like,
Yeah.
oof. Like if someone comes to me in that situation, I'm like, well, I'm not going to charge you anything, but let's get on a few calls and see if we can help, right? Because that's just. But that being said, which is a nice pivot into a different slightly different topic, is there's a lot of people who will leverage those points now of being desperate into very high ticket items, $10,000-$15,000, and people will leverage everything to get it. And that's something I think, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it's been around forever, but it seems like it's more in the forefront now of the industry.
So the way that our industry operates now, it's very visible. It's out there like, hey, we'll add X number of people to your gym in X number of days. I mean, there's never a week that goes by that I don't get a couple LinkedIn invitations from people who that's their title. And then there's constant Facebook ads kind of pummeling you with that sort of thing. And they're trying to find this person in a moment of desperation that feels like, hey, I need this, or else I'm going to close the doors, or else I'm not going to be able to pay the bills, or else my wife's going to leave me because I'm working 90 hours a week and I'm not making any money, or whatever. And the way that it's being presented now and the way it's being delivered now is different. But man, even when I got into the fitness industry, there were a lot of these, they called themselves marketing companies, and they would come post up in health clubs, and they would put a sales rep or more than one in the club. They'd market, and they basically would keep part of the EFT they brought in. It might be 30%, it might be 50%. And so they basically, you were providing the service or the amenities, and they were going to come in and hammer the market with low priced offers. They were going to hard close everybody, and they would come in and probably sell a decent amount, but they would have left a lot of scorched earth behind them. And more often than not, those gyms would end up closing sometime in the near enough foreseeable future because A, they never really learned anything that could be sustainable that they could go do on their own. B, the market now had been just chewed up and spit out. There was nothing left. Like they had a bad, like either somebody joined or they hated this gym.
Yeah.
And then, the third side of it is it was just a Band-Aid, right? Like it was just a temporary fix that we got cash flow up a little bit, but we didn't really solve the underlying problem. And so it's been around, but it was kind of like when the independent health club side of things really started to get overtaken by the franchise health clubs, that type of business model really kind of started to disappear. But it's been replaced in the personal training side with this, which is probably way better for the person providing it because they don't have to go post somebody up in somebody's gym or whatever else. They can do it all virtually and charge, $10,000 or $15,000 to, kind of get you to act as your own hardcore sales guy. But it just, I can't tell you how many gyms come to me after the fact and they're on life support, or I'll talk to them and I'll say, well, wait a minute. You're this testimonial on this person's site, and it said that you added 110 members in 90 days. So why does it say on this inquiry form that you have 65 members?
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, they all left. And in fact, some of my other members left because they didn't like the new culture.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, we get a lot of that. And it's like, man, if you can't do something that's sustainable, understand that there's probably some unsaid downside that's coming with the upside.
Yeah. I remember, the first time I ran a challenge in my gym, that format. And I think it was 2014.
Yeah.
Right when it was kind of coming into the market. And I was in no way in a point of desperation. I was just like, well, this sounds like a great format. Right. And it worked. Right. 6-week challenge, 220 leads in like a week, closed 50 of them, which looking back was actually a pretty bad percentage. But anyway, And then, I'm like, well, this worked great, right? Got all these new people signed up. So I did another one. And then I started getting, old members. People have been there for 5 years, 6 years, time be like, hey, this ain't cool, right? Like everything you're doing right now, it doesn't feel the same. The community's shifting. It just seems like you're more focused on new members than you are retaining your old ones. Like, and it was, thank God for those people, right? And because and then I tracked the numbers, 9 months later, I had retained 4% of those people who signed up. 4%. Now, my gym traditionally ran over 95% retention rate, sometimes 99, right? For months on end. So that was like a definitive culture shock. And I learned, right? So these things can be useful at times in the right circumstance as a tactic, but it can't be a full-on strategy.
Well, so I probably take as much blame for anybody as popularizing this front-end offer concept, right? Like kind of the test drive, try before you buy thing. Because I was teaching in 2006 because there were so many like health clubs out there selling 3-year memberships where they wouldn't even let you try out the gym more than a day. They'd give you a day pass, but really the whole time you were there, they were trying to sell you. And so, this idea of a front end offer, I felt like, man, if I was going to buy a car, I'd test drive it, right? There's something to be said for reducing the risk. But what I've noticed over the last few years is people kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater, and instead of seeing a front-end offer as a vehicle to build a sustained membership. So the only reason you're doing it is to get a long-term member, and everything about it should be to get the right person in the door and to move them towards that longer-term client. And you saw a bunch of people feeling like, hey, I'm just in the challenge game now, or I'm in the front-end offer game, and I'm just, it's just a revolving door. And it was even before the barrage of 6-week challenges. We saw it with the Groupon people a lot. It was like
That's right.
were running another Groupon. And, it's a tool. Anything where you can get somebody in the door to experience what you do, if what you do is really good, is a tool worth using. But you have to remember why you're using the tool in the first place. It's to get this person to stick around. So maybe you're better off, instead of having 100 people come in and sticking 10, maybe you're better off getting 15 people to come in, and maybe you still only stick 10, but you didn't alienate all the people who were there in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point. And it's like a deadlift, right? Is a deadlift good or bad? It depends on the context, right? How are you programming it, and for who and why, right? It's just a tool. And that's one thing people don't realize is, you can't just depend on that solely. You have to have all the back end things. And so many times, like you mentioned earlier, it's like, when people come looking desperately for marketing, it's a symptom of something else, usually many things, right? There's an issue with client experience, retention, staff, you name all of it. And it's a big indicator of what may be going wrong within their business. Now, I don't know if you've heard, Pat, but there's a whole new model called a hybrid model.
I think I've heard something about it. It sounds really new. Ironically enough, we were selling something along those lines in 2004.
Yeah.
But yes, according to popular opinion, it is now new.
Yeah, that's one of the most interesting things, and I laugh about all the time about the fitness industry. Is there's just not a whole lot of real new ideas, but everyone's taking things, rebranding it. I guess it goes with any industry, rebranding it, reframing it, calling it their own, and then running with it. Like this is the next big thing, and so don't fall for that either, people. If you hear that out there either.
No, and I think it had a lot of merit for us having basically a program that blended some in-person support and coaching with distance coaching or online coaching or whatever you'd want to call it. My first training business was about 10 or 15 minutes from Fort Knox. So we'd have people that came in who were, in military families. And so they'd move, and we'd try to continue to support them once they left. Right. Mm-hmm. And so there was a big component of those people. There were plenty of people that we saw that they wanted some direction and some support and some coaching, but they couldn't afford 2 or 3 times a week of training because most of what we did was in a one-on-one model. So that was another way to make it more cost effective. And for us, that actually preceded group training. So group training tried to solve a lot of the same problems. Hey, let's make coaching more affordable. We were solving it in a different way. Actually, before we launched group training, we didn't launch group training until 2007. But we were doing maybe the end of 2006. And then we were doing the supposed hybrid stuff like in 2004, almost from day one.
Yeah. And another part of the statement that's being thrown out there is that group training is dead. It's not.
This is the most popular group training's ever been.
F45 is at 2,000 franchises in a matter of 4 years. Like
F45 is huge. Orange Theory is huge. Fit Body's growing still like crazy. The camp's huge. There's still plenty of CrossFits out there doing well. There, and then you've got all the kind of single topic specialty type things, whether it's all the boxing type facilities or Pilates type facilities, and everything's done in a group environment. Group training not only is as popular as it's ever been, it's going to keep getting more popular because it's brought accountability and coaching to the masses instead of being something that was almost entirely exclusive to the affluent.
Yeah. And it's an interesting thing. And people would probably argue with this statement, but coming from a CrossFit background, seeing the growth of the group class happen so quickly within my world, the need for community for people, like classical social structures are breaking down a little bit, right? Not a lot of people go to church on Sundays, right? Not a lot of people meet in the, even at the pub. Everything's breaking down and people are becoming more connected, yet more isolated at the same time. And I've seen that if you can focus on community within a gym and in that group class environment, you can build something really special. And, what we're talking about too reminds me of, I've been asked a couple times in the last month, like, okay, well, what's the secret sauce? I hate to disappoint you, but there is no secret sauce. You master the fundamentals, right? You take care of your staff, you build your community, you focus on retention, you do all these things, and that's it. Maybe you get a nice marketing tactic that flows well for you and hits well, but I don't think there's a secret sauce.
You've got to be willing to do what it takes to be better than the other people in the market if you want better results, right? It's not complicated, but it takes probably a little more focus than most people are willing to put forth, because it's a little easier to spend all your time kind of chasing the next tactic that'll create this surge than to simply say, okay, how can we develop our staff a little bit better? How can we make the people that we're serving feel a little more connected and get a little bit better results? How can we communicate with our prospects a little bit more effectively? How can we give back to the community a little bit more? And, but like if you were to dissect any successful business outside of the fitness industry, they may do one particular thing really, really well, like the way that, Walmart was able to do what they did for years. It was like, hey, we're just going to be cheap and we're going to be in markets outside of major metropolitan areas. And that allowed them to grow like crazy. But those two things wouldn't have worked if there wasn't infrastructure, if there wasn't, like, they were still selling mostly the same stuff that everybody else was selling. So the quality wasn't any worse. So, I mean, you've got to still check all the boxes. I mean, no matter what, if you're talking about, like we talked about sports earlier, if we're talking about football, you're still going to have to be able to block and tackle no matter what kind of offensive scheme you use. If we're talking about baseball, you better catch the ball and throw strikes and all that fun stuff. And basketball, if you can't play defense and you can't shoot, then I'm not really concerned with what system you have. You're not going to win.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the same thing here. You can throw kind of your own twist on things to differentiate yourself. But if you do the basics better than everybody else, then you're probably going to be in really good shape.
Yeah. So, one final question for you. So when you look forward to the next 10 years, do you see, as far as like business coaching, mentoring within the fitness industry, do you see any significant shifts or changes or bubbles that may break? What do you think for the next 10 years?
I mean, it'll be very much like anything that's kind of the Wild West, right? Like certain people get weeded out, and like there'll be turnover because a lot of people jump into stuff because they think it's, it's easy money. It's almost like too good to be true. And then they'll move on and they'll pursue the next thing. Or it won't have worked out the way that the high ticket program they joined thought it was, like, taught them that it was going to. I remember meeting a guy who I thought was a really pleasant guy. He had no background in the fitness industry, but he had joined one of those kind of almost I guess a high ticket coaching school where we're just going to teach you to go run Facebook ads and teach you to hard close. And so he decided to start running ads and trying to get trainers. And he saw that, he wasn't gaining a lot of traction. And so I saw he jumped over to like chiropractors, and it kind of was so-so. And I think he eventually found his way doing something with like solar businesses. And that's where a lot of this probably goes, right? Like people are just going to keep feeling around till they find a soft spot where they can make an inroad. So it'll shake itself out, but there'll always be new people coming in. It would surprise me if it was as densely populated in 10 years as it is now, because I think that, there will probably be, maybe not to the extreme that the health club world went, but there will be more growth of the franchise model. And so that's going to squeeze out kind of the bottom 20% of the independents. And so the franchise model, they'll probably take a lot of the coaching in-house. So, I think the market will kind of shake itself out, which, it may not feel great for a few people, but to me, that's kind of always a good thing, because it's been our means of course correcting in the industry, since we don't necessarily have licensure or a lot of outside governing to do some of that. So it becomes a little Darwinistic, I guess, which, I'm not against, really. Yeah. I think to be a successful business owner, that's something to be earned, right? We as business owners, I feel like we're saying, look, we want something better and different than a traditional employee has. So we need to be willing to do a little bit more and do some things differently or better than the typical employee might do. And so I'm okay with it being a little bit harder.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think it's great. And, it's like the fitness industry is capitalism at its finest. It's like it's the free market model, right?
Very much right now, right?
Very much. Yeah. And, I don't know. I don't see it changing anytime soon. So Pat, I know, as of data recording, today is July 24th. And I think we'll probably release this in the next 2 to 3 weeks, but you're always putting new things out there as far as offers and services. What can people look at? How can you help people right now? What are some of the things?
Well, really, I do, for the most part, two things, right? I help people build their ideal business. So, hey, how do I build a business that serves who I want to serve? It allows me to have the income that I want, but also allows me to feel like I'm a business owner, not necessarily owned by my business. So some flexibility. So I help people that want to work on that as a whole, or in some cases, we'll break out a part of it, like lead generation to attract the right type of person, or just recurring revenue growth. Because a lot of times that's like the first domino, right? Like you can't hire help if you don't have revenue. You can't, you can't reinvest in the infrastructure of your business without cash flow. So, that's it. We do some stuff very specific to those kind of segments of the business, like lead generation or recurring revenue growth. And then we do kind of the holistic, build your ideal business type of coaching.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Pat, it's always a pleasure. I appreciate you coming back on. Believe it or not, we just talked for about an hour. Felt like it was 20 minutes. So
my pleasure. And it's always good connecting. And I've enjoyed spending a lot of time with you in conversations since that first podcast.
Yeah, it's awesome. You guys can check him out. Well, I'll put all the information into the notes for the show, but it's patrigsby.com. He's not hard to find. And I would get on his email list. It's awesome. And make friends with him on Facebook because he posts a lot of inspirational stuff on a daily basis as well. So keep up the great work, Pat. Talk soon, man.
All right. See you, man. Thanks a bunch.
Hey, fitness fans, don't leave yet. It's your host, Eric Malzone, and I have a quick favor to ask. Actually, 3 favors. So, number 1, if you're a fan of our show, I asked you to do something that takes under 3 minutes. Go to iTunes, please, and subscribe to our show. Please, please, please. It means so much to us. It's so important. And then give us a favorable review. We would really, really appreciate it. And I can't tell you how much it means and helps us out. So I know it takes 2 minutes of your day, and it means a lot to us. So please do that. Number 2, go to our YouTube channel, our Fitness Marketing Alliance, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel there. Number 3, if you like this episode or any of the episodes that we've released, share it on social. That's huge. That's a big deal for us. And we put a lot of work into these episodes, trying to give you great, actionable content for the fitness industry. So that would mean a lot. And that's it. So we have some big plans coming up for this show. I'll be talking about that in the next couple episodes. But thank you so much for listening. It means so much. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I love to hear from everybody. Eric, ERIC at fitnessmarketingalliance.com.